Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Activity Strong Executive Edition webinar. My name is Megan McMahon, and I am the Director of Strategic Development here at Link Senior. For today's webinar event, we are providing one free NAB, NCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, and NZ-SRDT CEU credit. And to be eligible, you do need to remain on this webinar for the full hour today. At the end of the event, I will provide the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the webinar room chat box. And I will also send that out by email this afternoon, so please be sure to check your spam folder in case it lands there. The CEU survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Time this Thursday. And if you have any questions about the process, please do email us at webinars@linksenior.com. CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of the day on Friday this week. I'll now go ahead and hand it over to Charles DeVille-Morand, CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Charles?
Thank you so much, Megan. Welcome, everyone. Welcome here in DC. It's very sunny, and it's very sunny DC on March 7th, sorry. And as Megan mentioned, this is an Activity Strong, it's an executive edition of Activity Strong, where obviously we are here to acknowledge and elevate the work of activity and life enrichment professionals. And we try to do that by inviting people besides outside the profession itself to help us elevate the discussion. So I'm excited to, in a few minutes, to introduce Marvel Adams and Erin Bonito. But to give you a little bit of background on Activity Strong, as Megan mentioned, we, Link Senior, started this initiative. We do this in partnership with Activity Connection, NAP, and NCAP. And again, the whole idea is to support and elevate the experience provided to residents in senior living. A little bit of a background is myself, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Very quickly, one of the very first things that I did when I started Link Senior was to get certified as an activity director. It was one of the best advice that I ever got. But since we've grown, and we're very fortunate to have, quote unquote, strong values. So you might be familiar with old people are cool. This is a discussion that we started 7 years ago, just on the basis that we're not a fan of segregation based on age. And obviously Activity Strong, which we're all benefiting from today, again, started right at the beginning of the pandemic to acknowledge, educate, and empower activity and life enrichment professionals. So that's a little bit about the background. As we get the questions very often, Link Senior is a company, we're based in Washington, DC. We touch the lives of 50,000 elders in the US and Canada through many leading operators as shown here. And essentially our work is simply to elevate engagement and help these organizations deliver on their promise of person-centered engagement. And we do that only by augmenting what the frontline team tries to do. We're proud of our work for many different reasons. One of them is the fact that we are, quote unquote, evidence-based. So this is the result of a year-long study that was published in 2019. So that's a little bit about us. Feel free to contact if you have any questions. And let me now introduce, or reintroduce, I should say, Marvel Adams, as he's been one of our really, I would say, Marvel, I would say successful speakers because you get amazing comments every time you come. But Marvel Adams is the founder and CEO of W. Lawson, and he is joined today by Erin Bonito, who's the founder and lead coach of Gemini Consulting. Marvel, I'll let you take it over from here, and thank you both so much for being our speakers today.
Thanks so much, Charles. I'm really delighted to be here. I am so excited seeing all the locations pop up. I think I saw New Zealand in there as well as close as Baltimore, where I am right now. So As Charles said, my name is Marvell Adams Jr. I say junior because there's a third running around that's 7 years old and has a twin sister. But I have committed my life to serving older adults. And this next chapter of my work really focuses on how do we become more inclusive and how do we create equity in aging, given so much that we can do in order to affect change and impact others positively. Aaron, I would ask if you could to tell the group a little bit about yourself. I know you quite well. Aaron and I met probably 15 or 16 years ago at this point, but tell us a little bit about your work, Aaron.
You bet. So for over 20 years, I've been the founder and lead coach of Gemini Consulting. And what does that mean, founder and lead coach? Like, it sounds really official. When I am not on a webinar like this, most weeks I'm hands-on collaborating with partner organizations that include skilled nursing care, assisted living, memory care, continuum care, sometimes home health. And I'm there for kind of two reasons. First, to work with individual caregivers. And by individual caregivers, I mean, it could be the CNA who struggles with giving a bath, or it can be the high school kid who's working the dining shift in the fancy dining room. And it could be the plant services guy who's moving through memory care trying to get his job done. So I work with individuals to help them become, we've heard from going from good to great. I like to collaborate with organizations who are going from great to masterful. And there are a lot of organizations. I bet lots of people listening in today would say, we're doing a really good job with our dementia, like a great job. But there's that little extra more that we could do, that master level. So I work with individuals. However, a big reason I'm with organizations is to help them create small armies of dementia communication coaches, masterful armies, so that we can build and design sustainable systems for dementia communication and care.
Wow. And I'd say, Aaron, we'll talk a bit more about some of the experiences we've had together over the years, but I have to say it was amazing that it was one of our social workers, Chantel, actually, at the Highlands Living Center in Rochester, New York, came back. I think she'd gone to a conference. It might have been a Pioneer Network conference, which is ironic.
It might have been.
I'm on that board now. But and she came back and was so excited. And I mean, it was beyond just we saw a cool thing at a conference. It was, in her words, a really life-altering experience to understand, like, wait a minute, we could really learn how to communicate, how to understand, how to hear what residents that are living with dementia and navigating cognitive change, what they are trying to communicate with us. And it's our responsibility to figure it out, but right. Before we get more into that, I'd really be curious, to hear a little bit about milestones of the journey that brought you here for your identity. I have to say that being a dad, being a person of color that grew up in the South, someone that has committed his life to serving older adults and being inclusive, my identity along the way, having lived in South Carolina, lived in Rochester, New York, Baltimore, and traveled all over the country, I've been shaped by my experiences. Some of those are related to, my unique identities, but some of those have to do with really understanding and listening to folks deeply, regardless of their language skills, regardless of their background. And it comes down to the heart of how do you be inclusive when you are trying to be as inclusive of diversity as you can, and I'd be curious to hear a little more about your own personal journey that shaped your identity.
Yesterday you challenged me to think about this, Marvell, and I thought, well, what are these milestones? And I've told a few stories over the years, so this might be repetition for you, Marvell, but these are really, truly, when I reflect deeply, these are my milestones. When I was 16, I grew up in rural Minnesota. I mean, deeply rural Minnesota. And the notion was that you were 16 and you go get a job. And my dad, he didn't give you a choice in the matter. He said, we talked to the neighbor, you're going to work at the nursing home. And I was going to work at the small city-owned nursing home in the dietary department. And I put about as much energy into it as a 16-year-old forced to work at the nursing home could put into it. you know,
Yeah.
got my sandwiches passed out and my diabetic desserts passed out. And I remember always trying to avoid this one corner of the dining room. And this is going to age me, Marvell, but it was where they had the feeders. That
Yeah, that's
medical,
an old term.
the
Yeah.
medical model language, the feeders, and they sat at the feeder table, that semicircle table. And there was one woman there. She seemed very scary to me. She was often hollering out and banging on the table. And I just, I'd set her period food down very carefully and get out of there. And I hadn't worked there, Marvell, probably 3 weeks. And I did that, I did my put it down and try to get out of there.
Yeah.
And she grabbed me. And she grabbed me so hard. I'll never forget it, Marvell. And she pulled me kind of across the table. And she said, "Young lady, you have no idea what it's like to be trapped in this kind of hell."
Mm.
And my blood ran cold.
Yeah.
She had addressed me, young lady.
Mm-hmm.
And moving forward, I can remember thinking like, she's there, there. And I would start to do what I later learned to become masterful dementia communication skills, getting down at her level, putting my hand on her hand, squeezing it and hoping for that squeeze back. High school propelled me into service through college and graduate school as working and semi-living in a home with 5 men who had Alzheimer's disease. Now, this would probably be illegal today under licensing, but our shift was 48 hours long, and we'd stay there alone with these 5 guys. And you better believe
you lived in a cooperative or like a housing for just a small house.
Small house, and we would live there for 48 hours at a time. And I was 19 years old, and being alone there with 5 people with Alzheimer's disease, what a crash course on learning their language. What a crash course on getting to understand their voice. That, of course, propelled itself to graduate school in gerontology, work as a program director in an Alzheimer's unit, and then ultimately the work I do now as a coach. And you notice I rattled past these last pieces because the milestones were formed early in my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say on the personal side, that's my professional side. On the personal side, 12 years ago, I became a mom, and my kids were born in Ethiopia. And here I was thinking I had some understanding of the issues around diversity and inclusion, equity. And then I got to see the world through my Black children's experiences. And I got to see firsthand what it was like when a person's voice wasn't heard and wasn't valued. I got to see firsthand what it was like for them to be excluded. Now, I didn't experience those things, but I have to tell you, as a mom, you feel like you're experiencing them. So I've had quite a bit of work in our school district and in our city and our county on anti-racism work and diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And to bring it all full circle, when the pandemic came around, suddenly I was at home a lot more, and my dad experienced dementia. And so for the 2 years where we were really home for the pandemic, I was just 4 blocks from my dad in his nursing home and being his voice during those years.
Mm-hmm. It's, I mean, it's amazing because I know the majority of your story, Erin, but hearing you talk about being adopted parents of 2 children that are Ethiopian born, then coming to the States, Cold Spring, Minnesota,
right?
And the journey of, okay, how do we figure out not only the inclusion journey for our kids, but like, what is our role in a part of this? Like, what is our role? Because we can't put ourselves in their shoes. And it's a part of you that I really cherish because from what I hear and what I imagine, it really allows that pivot to, okay, if we're going to be inclusive on purpose, if we're going to be intentional about this, I don't know if there's any other job on earth that we'll have that is more intentional than being a parent or a caregiver or a loved one of someone that has, special needs or specific needs. So, I'd be interested to hear a bit more about, so what does it mean to truly say the voices of someone that is navigating cognitive change or living with dementia? What does that mean to be able to really understand them and make sure that their voice is included?
I'll backtrack a little bit. When we were talking a few weeks ago, and you and I've talked a lot about these issues. And when I think of inclusion and equity, I think of the LGBTQ spectrum. I think of persons of color. I think of persons with certain abilities. I know disability isn't the right word, but different abilities.
Yeah,
And
the brains work differently.
Right. And you were the first person to say, hey, Aaron, people with cognitive impairment and cognitive changes, we need to look at that through an equity and an inclusion lens. And I was like, wow, like that's what we've been doing. But you were the first person to put a name to it. And, give me a little, I'll give you an example. So again, most weeks, I immerse myself in my client communities. So I'm there for days on end, and then we collaborate for months, sometimes, years we collaborate. So I really become part of the fabric of the organization, and becoming invisible and becoming kind of the fabric, I get to see a lot of things. And one of the things that I saw, and I've seen it multiple times, but it really brought home to me a couple of months ago. I was serving a lovely assisted living memory care community, very well appointed, very nice environs, if you want to say it that way. And in came a tour. So you have the tour guide, who you could tell is probably a little bit, the salesperson, the sales consultant, a little bit nervous about talking to people with dementia. You have the daughter with the very long face, a little bit weepy. You have the son who looks rather grim. You have the middle sister, who I assume she's the middle sister. I'm a people watcher, who she's nervously trying to make it all okay. And they came in a traditional tour style, and they stopped and they stood and they looked and they looked and they looked and they looked. And then they walked down this hall and they looked and they looked. And then they walked around to the dining area and they looked and they looked, and they, stood there with their, serious faces, looking, and hushed voices, right? Hushed voices, looking and talking, looking and talking. I could see one of the gentlemen. I could see him start to change his body language. I could start to see him change his facial expression. And I was about to go over to intervene when they made the corner and they left. That gentleman stood up. He walked directly over to the program director. And for everyone listening, I am going to curse now, just because this is exactly what he said. And I want you to know what he said. And he said to the program director, he said, "What do they think we are? A bunch of goddamn zoo animals?" And that was his voice. He'd been communicating it subtly. He'd been communicating it through his facial expression, through his gestures. But I challenge us, we may have superstar individual communicators on our teams, but organizationally, are we ensuring masterful practices? That's not a person-centered practice. You would be appalled if some stranger came through your house tonight, Marvell, and just had 3 or 4 tag-alongs, and they stared at you for a while and left.
Yeah, it's one of the things that has always stuck with me over the years, after training in Rochester, after traveling with you to different communities and helping and supporting you in coaching and training others in these in the skill sets, is the lens of really seeing the individual as a person, not as a disease, not as a behavior, not as someone on the schedule, for a shower, but instead a person. And as soon as that clicked in my head, it made so many things make more sense. And it made me realize that we were the problem. So for that tour example, I mean, can you imagine even if you lived in an apartment and someone just coming in unannounced, no context given, hushed voices. I think the one that really has always stuck with me is when you give the example of, if you're sitting in a room and someone walks in, "Hey, how you doing, Aaron?" And they walk right past you, they grab something with a bag, they leave, and they say, "Take care, Aaron." for someone that maybe living with cognitive change, what just happened to them, Erin?
Right. Who knows? This crazy stranger came in, grabbed their stuff, and left. Right.
Yeah, just got robbed. They just got robbed.
Mm-hmm.
And we think to ourselves, oh well, it's dementia. It's that's just ignore it. No, this person is telling you very clearly. Someone came into my room that I did not know and took stuff from me, and that is sticking with the person. And imagine what it would take to be able to attune that housekeeper, that environmental services support, to understand how to really approach, come into that room, welcome themselves in, and have that person have the opportunity to absorb what's going on, and actually save time, because the individual then has a touch point that gives them that endorphin boost versus one that's, I'm curious for the next 5, 10, 20, several hours, because what just happened was unusual. No matter the age or the cognitive level of the person, what just happened is unusual. And it's a remarkable thing that we go by every day and not think to ourselves, wait a minute, how can we do this differently? I'd be go ahead.
Oh yeah, I can interject because I'm blessed. I get to work with organizations who say, "Well, now what? How shall we give the tour?"
Mm-hmm.
And without taking us too far afield, imagine you are the community that sits in an office outside of memory care, and you say, "Folks, I'm going to ask you to leave your coats here, take them off, leave your purses here. I'm going to lock them up in my closet. We're not going to wear any of these things or carry any of these things, and I'm going to tell you why." Already you've set yourself apart, right? And then when we go into the unit, we're going to go and, we're going to sit down at a table, and we're probably going to visit with a few of the folks that live there before we look around a lot. And here's why. And then go and model greeting and being with and asking permission. If it's okay with you, I thought I'd show the Johnsons around. And I guarantee you, because I've done tours like these for years and years, the fellow's going to say, "Well, yeah, show them around, show them the place." That's person-centered. That's allowing a person to use their voice.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And when we talk about that being inclusive on purpose, it's the distinction that allows us to really welcome and have someone feel a sense of belonging. It's and it's no different for any person, but recognizing that if we were to right now, move ourselves to France, Charles's homeland, and just assumed, well, they're speaking this other language to me. I don't really know what it is, but they have dementia. Right. Yeah, that has those are not issues that are on the person that has going through the cognitive change. It is on the individual. It is on us to really learn and understand the language that they are speaking, the language that is changing, quite frankly, and one that will continue to change. I'm sure there are many folks on today that have had those experiences of communicating, had those experiences perhaps of uncertainty, even fear. Could you tell us a little bit about maybe a moment where you've had an individual that is kind of that unfortunate, stereotypical individual, like, look out for this guy, he's going to swing at you, and have us understand, how do you understand what that person is trying to tell us? And then how do you turn around and actually engage and communicate with them?
The stories I could tell you. Well, I probably have told them to you, Marvel. When I became a mom, when you and I first knew each other, I had the great privilege of going all around the country. I've been in all 50 states and collaborating and coaching. You and I had the opportunity to even go to England and do a little of this. And
That's right. I forgot about that.
Right. And then suddenly, in the most dramatic way, I was a mom to a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And that's a really dramatic way to become a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I brought my work, much closer to home. And for about 8 years, I had the great privilege of closely collaborating with the veterans' homes in Minnesota, and especially one of the veterans' homes that serves some of what you would call most challenging behavioral symptoms.
Mhm.
And we don't have those fellows just in veterans homes, right?
Right.
They can be anywhere, and they're not just fellows always. They can be women as well. And so I'm going to share with you just a very recent situation. This was within the last month. I was collaborating with a community, again, assisted living, memory care, and they had a fellow who was newly moved in. To
Mhm.
describe this fellow, 6'5", unsteady on his feet, but certainly desiring to walk, and
Mhm.
hands like baseball mitts. I mean, just huge hands.
Yeah.
And a really gruff manner of moving through the world. You know, he had started his own construction company. He talked to everybody like guys on a construction site might talk to guys. And I think I wasn't there the first week of his admission, but I think immediately he wasn't viewed as a person.
Yeah.
I think he was viewed as a threat. And if our teams view someone as a threat, here's what they do. They shy off a little bit. They don't offer hugs. They don't offer genuine human contact. They don't sing or dance with the person. They're very reserved. They're very careful. So now the signal that the person is getting can be perceived as unfriendly. It can be perceived as a threat. And I think a lot of that happened during his first week. And he, unfortunately, it was such a breakdown in communication that he twice pinned employees against the wall. And once they felt their only option was to call law enforcement.
Yeah.
And you know, it's tough, right?
Mhm.
We're all going to draw short straws in our life. You know, his short straw was dementia. Happened to be a big person with dementia. And ultimately law enforcement was called on him. And this is a good team, okay? If anybody on the phone or on our call today is listening from your team, I know you're a good team, right? I know you're good dementia communicators. When we started to be more intentional, though, when I got involved in it, we practiced just some very, very basic skills with him. First of all, we practiced just like taking a nice grounding breath, which we should do before we speak with any person, right? Just, I'm relaxed, I'm easy. And approaching him with that relaxed gait, that easy way, and while keeping a safe distance, getting down below eye level. Because getting down below eye level, if he's sitting in his chair and I'm kneeling down below eye level, Marvell, who's in charge?
Yeah.
He is.
Exactly.
He is.
Mhm.
And then a big, well, hello, sir. The handshake indicates what?
I'm here. I'm a friend, and I'm here to engage with you.
Yep, I'm here. I'm a friend. I'm not a threat. And I respect you. That handshake. I respect you. And he gets to choose whether to shake our hand or not. We worked on skills like this. One of the things that was necessary was to look at his feet and do some examination of his feet that week.
Mhm.
So I'd done some of those introductory skills. I'd use simple statements, like, well, good morning, Harlan. Zip it. Wait, 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 wait. For a coaching practice, I always start our teams with 7 words or less, knowing that's going to change. For some person, if they don't have significant language impairment, far more than 7 words is okay. For other people, much later in the disease, 3 or 4 words may be about right. But we start our coaching with that middle of the road, 7 words or less. Good morning, Harlan. 7 words or less, zip it. Wait, wait, wait. As a middle of the road guideline, I say we may be waiting up to 7 seconds. That's middle of the road. You coach in the middle of the road, knowing that it's going to be shorter for a lot of folks and longer for others. For him, it was a lot of repetition. Harlan, Harlan, zip it. Wait, wait. And then when he makes eye contact, now start with more of those simple statements, some rapport building statements, some endorphin statements, but finally to the point where I said, we're here to look at your foot. We're here to look at your foot. 7 words or less. Zip it. Wait. Now, what do we do though to keep this easy between us? I bet your mom tickled your toes. Now, we're not speaking to him as if he's a child. I want to be clear about that.
Right.
But that's an irreverent comment. And we use those irreverent comments intentionally. I bet your mom tickled your toes. And he chuckled. Why the hell would she do that?
And Aaron, what I love, and you're going after the part of his brain, the memories that are most likely still there and accessible in a way that he can then be like, okay, I know something about what we're talking about. I can get in on this conversation. I can be included.
I bet your mom said this little piggy went to market. He laughed. This little piggy stayed home. He laughed more. We went through that on all of his toes multiple times. And guess what the nurses were doing? They were able to completely look at everything they needed to look at with his feet. And at the end, and I want you to picture a caregiver, maybe 5'1", maybe 110 pounds, a 21-year-old whose plan is to be a physical therapist. She's going to school for that right now and working here on the side. And the final thing she said to him, which we had coached, is she said, Harlan, I haven't had a hug today. And she zipped it. And she waited and waited and waited. And I'm telling you, those big mitts of those hands came out, wrapped her in, and he held her for the longest time. He held her like he might have held a grandchild, like he might have held his mother. And we didn't do anything. There's nothing miraculous about these skills. There's not even anything new about these skills. Like, I don't want anyone listening to go like, oh, Erin Benito thinks she invented these skills, because I didn't. They're just best practices in dementia communication. But what we have failed to do, I think, as a profession, I think we've failed to instill these muscle memories in our teams. The muscle memories for getting low, the muscle memories for zipping it, the muscle memories for the tone of voice we use, the muscle memories for how we hold our face. So it's not, none of that's hard, but it requires intention, and it requires coaching and feedback. But in the end, I can relate to you now. It's a different experience for this man. He has a different quality of life thanks to some intentional dementia communication skills.
And Erin, I can think back to the first time we had you at a community I was serving in front of a group of aides and nurses, and I remember there was one aide that she was about 6'2", and part of her story that we later learned, because she joined and started doing the training, is that she had gotten used to being very reserved with folks, because she was the tall woman, a tall girl growing up, and kind of seen as an unwelcoming person. And I'll never forget that she just had this look of skepticism on her face. And you looked at me and said, here's the thing. Nothing is going to work 100% of the time. So if you're thinking in your head, oh, Erin's telling me how to make this easy breezy, and every time I go, no. If any approach that we learn when it comes to communicating with someone, going through cognitive change, if you can get through and receive information consistently, but understand that it's not going to be 100% of the time ever, you really are successful. And it's that understanding, that mile marker, that no, we're not talking about getting from 0 to 100 and then staying there. This is a journey, just like any other journey of inclusion for someone. In order to keep their voices heard, in order to keep them included in the conversation, and frankly, their lives and the community around them, it really does take getting it into your muscle memory. I mean, this is, like I said, 16 years ago, I met you, and I still very instinctually get down an eye level, add or below eye level, 7 words or less, statements instead of questions. And I thought of you tremendously when there was a couple of years ago, and Lady Gaga had gotten some notoriety because she was co-presenting with Liza Minnelli at an award show, and Liza Minnelli was in a wheelchair. And there was all this buzz about how she was so welcoming, and she knelt down and so other stuff. And I'm like, that's it. That's exactly what it is. And the thing that's amazing is it naturally makes sense to most folks. But if it's not in your muscle memory, if you aren't practicing and drilling and training on that and really methodically understanding how to speak this language and hear it, it's just like as if we were going to France and didn't learn French. Like, it's like, well, how is this going to work? Either you're going to change or you're expecting that person to change. And I can guarantee you, it's gonna be a conflict because you have not learned how to hear what that person is communicating.
And can I take it to the next level, Maribel? Because, early in my career, so much of my time was spent on developing tremendous individual communicators and even doing train the trainer with those communicators. And the thing was, and I think I probably shared this with you, there came a point maybe 10 years into my practice when I realized I wasn't satisfied with it, because you could come back a year later or 2 years later, and it was if I hadn't been there. It was the razzle dazzle for a few days. We really trained you and you got this great certificate. And now you're going to have some tools to go back for 4 hours or 8 hours and train some other people in your organization. And this is not to denigrate any work like that. Any work we do on dementia communication is valuable and good. But I don't know that that model lends itself to deep organizational transformation. That deep organizational transformation includes, weeks, months, years of working side by side with our teams to truly make those muscle memories part of their fabric, and then build the systems in the organization to continue that work.
And the thing that is so resonant with that, for me at least, is when you talk about systemic isms and whatever it is, ageism, racism, whatever it is, the systemic part of it is really the common denominator. When you talk about communicating with and including the voices of folks experiencing cognitive change, you really are talking about how are we positioning ourselves to understand and hear and include their voices, but how are we doing it not just individually, but organizationally? Because as you said, an individual can do and does so much on a daily basis for residents that we serve and support. The systems around them sometimes make it much harder, sometimes make it seemingly impossible, and many times don't change enough in order for the infrastructure to provide systematic change and inclusion for voices that aren't being heard because someone is experiencing dementia. So I am 100% with you, because it's not just about that cognitive change for that person. There's so much going on with residents that live in communities that we serve that their voice of inclusion is paramount. But not only that, the systemic changes that will take place and have to take place in the administrator's office, in the director of nursing office, in central supply, in the dining room, at the front desk, in the marketing office, all of it is really a cohesive ecosystem that has to evolve in order for that inclusion to take place.
Can I give you a quick example? This is a small systemic piece here. When I was on site with a client earlier this year, we were just planning our interactions we were going to have. We were going to model some best practices. And suddenly in through the door comes the carpeting guys. And carpeting guys, these are outside vendors. These are carpeting guys who are boom, 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 down the hall with this bunch of supplies. Boom, 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 down the hall with this bunch of supplies. 3 of the 7 people in the dining room you could see instantly were triggered by that. You could see them change. You could see them tighten up. I was early in my coaching practice with this team. We hadn't built the systems yet for how do we coach vendors before they step foot in our building.
Yep.
The system for the plant services guy says, okay, carpeting is scheduled today. We're going to have a delivery team bring the carpeting in at this time. We're going to have these other guys come and lay it at this time. Where are we going to meet? Where are we going to do our 15, 20-minute little exercises with them? Where are we going to have them put their coats? Where are we going to practice? That's a piece of the system that, like, it's small, but it's so significant, because those guys just tromping through there would have dramatically changed the day for 3 of those women.
I mean, it's that taking that time and taking that opportunity. I have to say, I remember at times when I was actively, on a weekly, daily basis, practicing these skills. And I remember her name was Agnes, and I've been.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
I remember her.
Yeah, I've been in the living for at least 3 or 4 years, and it was always, I just, hey, how you doing? You walk past, say hello, and the person doesn't say anything back. Hey, how you doing? And you just go around like you're happy-go-lucky, and you're almost proud of yourself, because it's like, I walked around and it didn't seem like I upset anybody, and everything seems to be going well today. And but then I learned that the moment I slowed down, got down at Agnes's eye level, said a statement as simple as, wow, that is a beautiful blue shirt. And wait. And lo and behold, comes out of Agnes a voice that I did not think existed. And it was the beginning of a really different experience for me that as you can see, touches me to this day, because it's recognizing that if we're going to do this work, and we're going to do it inclusively, and we're going to bring equity to those that we serve, then we really do have to take the time and opportunity to be in their space and be present in a way that allows them to have their voices heard. And for Agnes, for 3 or 4 years, all she heard was this idiot guy walking past waving, which is like, maybe it looks familiar. But all she knows is that he's going right past, and for me to really be the person that was the change. And then I'll have to I'll save any more stories for another time. But I'd be curious to hear, Erin, when you talk about outcomes, and when you talk about having those systems that really instill these skills into the muscle memory, can you tell us a little bit about, what type of outcomes do you think folks should be striving for, or examples of what you've seen when it comes to that organizational change?
Right. So it's a great question. Let me say this, so much of our conversation about equity and inclusion is about doing it because it is the right and ethical thing to do, right? I always wish we could just demolish the word dementia, right? Just get rid of that word. We're not in the dementia business. We're people serving people. Yep. That's what we are. And when we put on this word dementia, then we see this lens, dementia, right? Dementia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell a story, just a quick story before I get into the outcomes. And I use these stories, they're individual stories, but because I've seen them so often. We know, for instance, that the undermanagement of pain and discomfort among persons with dementia is a real problem in the United States. The undermanagement of pain and discomfort, because there's this lens that some of us wear that says, oh, this person's doing that weird thing because they have dementia. This person's writhing around because they have dementia. This person is hollering out because they have dementia, rather than carefully doing a pain assessment. I worked with one fellow that stands out last year. I'll call him Dale. If you looked at him like you looked at a person, you'd say, wow, Dale is really uncomfortable, right? Like, he doesn't look, things aren't right. And so a really well-intentioned nurse came and said, Dale, are you having any pain? He couldn't answer that.
Right.
She said, do you need anything? He couldn't answer that. So she went on her way using the intentional skills I worked with this nurse later, and we got down and said, Dale, and then zip it. He was kind of like a 3-word guy. Dale, you look uncomfortable. Zip it. Wait, 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 wait. And his head nods. Show me where it hurts. Show me where it hurts. Zip it. Wait, wait, wait. He nods his head just a little bit that way. Through a series of statements like this, we got to the point where we identified where he was hurting. And finally, he did verbalize, because we've been patient enough, we had long enough statements, and he leaned in, he says, my ass. He'd been sitting too long. He hadn't been repositioned. Right?
Yeah.
Voice was there, but he wasn't going to get to use his voice if we'd, in that case, use probably 10 to 15 second pauses. But to outcomes, when you think about that this is good and right for the person with dementia, it's also very helpful for our organizations. I pulled out just one of, some of the outcomes we've experienced, and there's more than this, but I wanted to highlight this company. This was a company of 31 long-term care sites in the Midwest. Some were skilled nursing, some were skilled nursing with specific memory support. This was 31 communities across a 2-year investment in becoming really masterful dementia communicators and building the systems so that it could be sustainable. At 2 years across their company, the average drop in antipsychotics was 29%.
Yeah.
Behaviors affecting others, the average drop was 39%. In 2 years, there'd been an average on average. Now remember, this is an average, so there were some that were much higher than this.
Oh yeah.
There had been a 50% reduction in team member injuries.
Yeah.
And when you think about, folks will say, well, doesn't this take time? This takes time. What you're showing here, and takes time, all this waiting. Guess what? We're already using the time. When the person has the challenging behavior that then we try to backpedal and deal with, we're using the time. When the person's challenging behavior ripples out on everybody else in our memory care neighborhood, we're using the time. More than ever, we need to be investing in this, not because it's right and good, but it is, but also because it's what we need in our organizations.
Yeah. Oh my God. That is part of the journey that really starts to show that this can have an impact in a way that we really know it should. We know that these things have to be a part of the experience for residents that we're serving. But many times when it comes to equity and inclusion, there's either a trepidation around, do I start? How do I start? What do I do? I'm afraid. And that difference and that not understanding what that person is experiencing really is at the core of a lot of the work we do, whether it's cognitive change, whether it's hypertension, whether it's diabetes, understanding what that person is experiencing, and then evolving so that we can make sure that their voices are included. I have to say that to this day, I'm able to rattle off at or below eye level, simple statements of 7 words or less, statements instead of questions. It's in me, and I love the fact that it was something that was a gift you gave, because we really understood how to communicate and how to listen. I'm sure there are some questions that our participants may have today. And so I'll pause for a minute, Megan, to see if we want to do some questions now. But, I have to say, Erin, this feels like, we were doing this just yesterday, even though it was, a decade and a half ago. But to this day, I have to say, the outcomes we saw and the impact that was held, I could, it's countless numbers of families But one in particular that stands out, we were doing a small group work and reminiscing. And a family, we'd asked them to bring in some items from their dad's kind of like past. And so their dad really enjoyed baseball, and his son enjoyed baseball. And it was another one of the situations where that person's voice was rarely ever heard. They'd really become isolated because of someone's in the community not understanding and hearing their voice. And after working with him and really starting to hear him, his son wrote us this letter and said, thank you. Thank you, because you gave me my dad back. Even a small amount of time as it was, you gave me my dad back. And they were able to reminisce in a way that just the family, and honestly, and shame on us, our community had kind of thought was impossible or given up on. And it's that piece of the tenacity of, no, you have to work at this. This is not, it's like if you say to someone, hey, I have this medication, and just give it once, and it'll work. Okay, well, what about after that? Well, you have to keep doing it. You have to keep perfecting. You have to keep going at it.
Well, and if I can interject, it goes back to like when I was 16. I had modeled what everyone in that organization had shown me to do, which was to stay away from the scary lady, walk past her. She's not in there, just ignore her. And I would like to pop into, I saw a question pop up that I cannot wait to answer. So I'm going to put it out there. The question was, and this is such a real question, with all the turnover, like, how do we possibly do this? This is the beauty of coaching for muscle memories. We can coach, and we do. So imagine, I'm going to pick a community I've worked with lately. Imagine we have initially 13 in-house coaches, someone in plant services, someone in dining, a couple people, 2 or 3 nursing assistants, a couple of nurses, someone from laundry. And I'm sure I'm leaving people out, but imagine this interdisciplinary team of coaches. These are skills that can be introduced in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. If we have to rely on the dementia class,
right,
it's not going to happen. And there will be another wave of these champions. We'll leap up to 20 of these champions or 30 of these champions. Now these, they're going to go on to other jobs. So we'll continually replenish our champion team. But when you are the CNA mentoring a brand new employee, and you can say, the thing that works well with Dale is just to get down. And then with your voice, say, good morning, Dale. Don't say, good morning, Dale, because that's too high and he can't hear it. So these muscle memories, here's been my experience. And maybe you remember this from our time working together. When you have this army of educators, they can't not share it because they're so excited about it. And it becomes very organic. And certainly we schedule classes, but the real mastery is happening at the ground level from person to person.
Yeah, it's because the system is changing, and that's what accounts for quite frankly, being able to handle it. Like, they have new folks coming in. But I love the fact also that when you're talking about get attainable eye level, there's easy ways to kind of like sidestep it. Well, my back and this, and it's like, look, no one said you gotta get on your hands and grab a stool,
grab a chair, right?
Sit on the edge of the bed, whatever it takes. But like, it's there are ways to do it, but we have ourselves kind of trained thinking, well, no, you can't do that. So we'll pivot. Other questions, Megan, that you think we could bring forth?
Yes, thank you, Marvell. And Aaron, we have a question here from Maverly. I experience more challenges when the person is first becoming forgetful. What is the best way to manage this person who is in that initial period and oftentimes not aware of what is happening?
Well, a person is a person is a person, right? You can't prescribe what works well for this person. And just as a note, I understand the question fully. I encourage folks to eliminate the word manage. We're not managing people. We're not dealing with people or dealing with behaviors. We're walking alongside them in this journey. And for this person, I think of my dad in those early stages. It is just taking those deep breaths right along with them, matching their energy right along with them. My dad would say things like, God, what in the hell is wrong with me? Am I losing my marbles? I'd say, Dad, I don't know. You might have lost one. He'd say, ah, damn it. Like, okay, but I've got it for you, Dad. Here, take your marble back. I think it's not thinking about them as a person to be managed, but a person to be walked alongside.
Mm-hmm. And I have to interject and say that it becomes a piece of how you learn to bring your humanity, which exists. You would not be in the community that you're serving if you did not have the humanity and the skill set to do the things that we're discussing, including the voices of folks. And so, when it comes down to for whatever stage of the journey as someone may be navigating cognitive change, as you said, Erin, each time it comes down to their personhood and recognizing that what they're sharing with you, absorb it. I'm losing my marbles. I saw a couple down the hallway. Let's go check it out.
Right.
It does not have to be this, oh my God, what are we going to do? And it's like, well, match their energy if you can, but understand that every behavior, every word, every utterance,
that word
is someone communicating with you and trying to use their voice. And how do we help our ears and eyes see that?
And on that note, you saw me make my gag symbol. In the communities I work with, we work pretty hard to eliminate that word, because every single behavior, that's just communication. If you have a toddler, and again, not saying the person with dementia is childish, but childlike in communication. If you have a toddler getting all red in the face and screaming and rubbing their eyes, and you don't say, oh, my toddler's having a behavior, right? You don't say that. You go, oh, right. Something's up. I better figure out what it is.
Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they stubbed their toe.
Right. Yeah. We have that ability. We all are wired with it. But when we put the dementia lens between us and that person, it all goes haywire.
Erin, I know we could talk forever, but our good friend Charles needs to interject here. This is just too fun.
I hope we get to do it again.
We should. Yes, I was exactly going to say that, Erin. We should do it again. Thank you both. Pretty amazing. Erin, I remember one of my very first instructors saying, like you said, behaviors, quote unquote, they come for two reasons, right? Either pain or boredom. But in the end, it's just communication. So I definitely love that conversation. Both we started with the goal of having a discussion about how equity starts in memory support, but I think that we've well exceeded that. I've learned things myself a lot, both from your professional experiences, but also this very kind of forward-thinking and visionary analysis. So thank you so much for your participation today, this great discussion. What I'd love to do is just share my screen to share your contact information. And anyone, if you have any questions or any follow-up, because I know there was a lot of discussions in the chat, please feel free to reach out to both Marvell and Erin. And also, in the spirit of helping our audience, both Erin and Marvell were so kind to help us design a tip sheet. So if you all, want to take some of this knowledge and some of these tips, Erin, like your wait, I have that now, I will think about it a lot. But if a lot of us want to kind of go further, please consider this tip sheet. Consider it for yourself, obviously, consider it for your team. Like Erin said, like a lot of these tips are tips that your team members are gonna react and incorporate quickly and effectively. But also think about it like as an organization, like how can you take it further? I like to say that often memory support is the litmus test for a lot of things, right? The antipsychotics use. But I think with this discussion, we now know that memory support is also the litmus test for equity. diversity and inclusion. So Marvel and Aaron, thank you again so much. And yeah, would love to have you again. And it was a great discussion. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks a lot. In terms of like announcements for upcoming events, we just have a few, and if you just allow me to go through them. Now onto its fourth installment, we're super excited to announce that on June 27th, we will be holding our largest event of the day, I was going to say the day, not the day, sorry, the year. It's called the Annual Activity Strong Virtual Event, and that is on June 27th. So the link to register is on our webpage and on the chat. Thank you very much, Megan. The second one, much closer, is actually very much in the line of our discussion today. We are, Dr. Laura Birmingham is a long-standing partner of Link Senior and Activity Strong, and he's going to have a discussion very almost granular, talking about cutting-edge non-pharmacological interventions for memory care. So that's our second announcement. The third one is that's a partnership we have with Senior Housing News, and that's actually next week. And we're very excited to partner with David Troxel, who's the founder, and he wrote the Best Friends Approach with Virginia Bell, and he's going to be partnering with somebody from ACTS Retirement Community by the name of Aaron Castro. So that's Wednesday next week. And the other announcement we have, I think we have two more, is that like we did last year, and Marvel, it's so serendipitous to have you here, because actually Marvel was one of our speakers at our customer summit, but we have a client exclusive summit coming up in May. So if any one of you is one of our twin client partner, just as an FYI, you'll receive an invitation very shortly. And so it's actually many announcements today. The next one here is NAP, which is the National Association of Activity Professionals, is holding their annual conference on April 30th to May 3rd. So please consider joining us. I'll be speaking there on the Sunday evening. And here's the last one, which is we have our Inner Sparkle monthly Facebook Live with Brian Rice. And we're so excited to have Rochelle Blau. He's a long-standing friend of ours, of myself. He's a senior living consultant and VP of corporate training for the National Council of Certified Dementia Practitioners. Whew, that's a lot of talking. Thank you so much for your patience, Marvel and Aaron. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks again for joining us. Take care.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.